everyone. Welcome back to the Common Sense Gospel. I'm Danny Simmons.
And I'm Kurt Norbert.
We are looking at Galatians 6 today. We hope to cover the first 5 verses of Galatians 6. The title of our podcast is Restore Such a One. And that'll be the heart of our conversation, is this idea of restoring such a one. And I'd like to begin just reading the passage so we have all of it together as we consider it. Galatians 6:1, Brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone, and not in another. For each one shall bear his own load. That is Galatians 6, 1 through 5. So it begins, Kurt, brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass. What are we talking about? Who is this man and what has he done?
Well, it's a brother or sister, obviously, yes. Because in the context, you're seeking to restore them. And we don't see, I don't think, any overt rebellion here. It's not like necessarily a hard heart. This command, and as we discussed, this is a command through the Apostle Paul from the Lord. So I think we need to look at this passage that way. Here's an individual who's been overtaken in some trespass. It may be public, may be private, but anyway, it's come to the attention of at least some brethren,
right? Perhaps
the whole church, but probably not. It's more of a private thing. You see this situation or you become aware of it, so you're seeking to restore this individual. So it's an individual that can apparently still be reached. The possibility is there. Otherwise, you don't cast your pearls before swine. You're not going to waste time going to someone who's hardened in sin. But this is a brother or sister in a particular weakness. A trespass has snared them. They've been overtaken by it. And so the spiritual person is given the responsibility of restoring that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I have on my notes that he's not rebellious, not refusing to hear, but instead, like you said, this is made known. He's convicted that he's definitely been overtaken. As you said, it's made known, and now most likely he or she is trying to return to the Lord. And now Paul's saying to the one who's spiritual, you go step in and help assist this individual. Mm-hmm. And so there's the next part. We have someone now who's overtaken by trespass. That's obvious. We have a group of Christians who are involved in this. And we know Galatians 6 and what it says. So the next part of it is, you who are spiritual, restore such a one. And so who gets that job?
The spiritual person.
Oh, yes.
That's a good question, because if we're going to unpack this passage, what does it mean to be a spiritual person? Who is this individual who has the responsibility to help this one? Well, it's a person that I believe is synonymously referred to in the New Testament as being filled with the Spirit. This is one who looks to the Spirit for guidance and direction through the study of His Word, through prayer. He is the one who influences and guides that person's life. And I was thinking, as we mentioned during your class this last Wednesday on Romans, in Romans 1:29, it talks about those depraved individuals who had departed from the Lord and just were falling into abominable sin. It says they were filled with wickedness, and then this long list of heinous sins. Well, what does it mean that they were filled with unrighteousness and ungodliness and all that? Well, that was the emphasis of their life. That's what was driving them. That's the direction they were walking in. That was their walk in darkness, filled with sin. Well, that's the opposite of what we're looking at here with the spiritual person. Their life is consumed with following the Spirit. They are their dedication and their goal is to let the Spirit influence them. That's what drives them. You only can have that through the study of the Word that the Spirit's revealed, and through a life of prayer. So that spiritual person is, it's not a miraculous filling. To be filled with the Spirit is a result of a choice.
Yes, sir.
I want God, I want Jesus to guide my life, because I know that if they don't, I am just flailing around in the darkness in a hopeless situation. I can't see where to take my next step. So I look to what God has revealed through the Spirit, and so then I can be filled with the Spirit. He's the one that fills my life. He's the one who directs my life. I live in submission to Him. And so I guess to summarize, that spiritual person is the prepared person, the spiritually prepared individual.
And wouldn't the group of Christians who are trying to find the right person, wouldn't they know that and see that?
Right.
That the person is spiritual, that let him who is spiritual, or you who are spiritual, restore such a one. And so most likely someone would be nominated who is a rather selfless person and, not demanding the job, but being seen as the right choice. And I think most folks would agree that this is the one who should kind of go in a personal way, because they're filled with the Spirit, they're spiritual, and then they're going to have to move in with a spirit of gentleness.
Right,
so
right.
There it is again, that it needs to be tended to carefully, and we've got to be gentle in that process, because we can also be tempted, which he certainly deals with in that next statement. Restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. The idea to restore is to fit, to join together, to compact together, to repair or perfect for the full destination of use. And I like that, to repair or perfect for the full destination of use, to bring back into its proper condition. And a spirit of gentleness is required. This person can't be haughty and high-minded and impatient, because these things take time. In most cases that we would discuss or see come about in our life, these aren't just, hey, you're spiritual, go tell him to get his act together, and then you say a few words and then he's all back on track, everything's fixed. This takes time. We're told in James as well, toward the end of James' letter, he says, confess your trespasses in verse 16, James 5:16. Confess your trespasses to one another. So this is someone who's overtaken by trespass. Mm-hmm. Confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. And you mentioned several times in this idea of someone who's spiritual that they would be strong in their prayer life, I guess. They are prayers. They take that part of their spiritual walk very seriously. And we want that person to know intimately all that's come about for this person to have fallen into this trespass or been overtaken, and to pray about that to the Lord as a way that they seems to be right to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and looking at this, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted, this is going to be a humble person too, because they are aware of their vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
You just noted James, and James also talks about looking into the perfect law of liberty.
Yep.
You see that, you look into God's mirror, His Word, and you see your reflection, because He reveals what we are.
Yes, He does.
And so here's a person that says, okay, yes, they have a spiritual self-awareness, I guess you could say. They know what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are. And so they don't go into this battle with their eyes closed. Mm-mm. They know what they're getting into. Here's a person overcoming a trespass. I have the ability and the opportunity, which gives me the responsibility. I used to hear old preachers always say, we've got a spiritual formula here, A plus O equals R. Ability plus opportunity equals responsibility.
Nice.
And so they're ready to do that, knowing their own temptations. They're aware of what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 10:12, that if you think you stand, you better be careful. Beware lest you fall.
Yeah.
Because it's the self-confident, arrogant person that, I've got this. I'm the one who has it all together. They're the one who's ripe for a fall.
Yeah.
Because they're not aware of their weak points, but the enemy sure is.
Yeah.
And that's where he's going to strike.
Absolutely.
And I might just also notice that the thought just occurred to me. Paul says here, you who are spiritually restored. This doesn't necessarily limit it to just one person.
That's right.
Going to see that individual. Now, you don't want half the congregation to show up in their living room and, hey,
At the
need to
same
talk
time.
to you.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be just one, though. It could be two, maybe three. Because remember, Ecclesiastes 2 is better than one, and a threefold cord is not easily broken. So there's that mutual support in this situation. And it's going to emphasize to the one that's overtaken, hey, these people care about me.
Yeah.
Here's these brethren here to talk to me about this. So that strength of numbers can have a strong impression too.
And coming in a spirit of gentleness will make that person who's, again, there's a trespass that has overtaken them, but that picture, they didn't come in and slap him around and
Right.
tell him how ashamed they are. None of that. They're gentle in spirit, and they approach this individual in that way. So all that would be seen. And I like that a lot, because as I looked at it, like, you who are spiritual, restore such a one. And I was thinking, that could be a group of people. Because let those who are spiritual. But I noticed at the end of the verse, he says, consider yourself lest you also be tempted. So we want to be careful about, but that would be to each individual who's been called upon or has chosen themselves to move forward with this. It could still be 2 or 3 people, but each one needs to examine themselves lest they also be tempted. So it does fit, it does apply. And I think there's great wisdom if you chose an individual to go and to reach out and to help one who is overtaken. And that person in their own thought says, I'm going to ask Brother so-and-so to come with me. Because with his insight, he says, we just had a meal with this guy 2 weeks ago. We had a really good time. He seems to like Brother so-and-so, or whatever. Yeah. That information's useful because, like you said, now these two come back to this individual in a spirit of gentleness, and they're there for one reason, and that's crystal clear. And that's a beautiful picture of brethren bearing up under this struggle that an individual has found themselves in. It is to, verse 2, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. It's to set the shoulder underneath, to get up underneath the weight that is crippling one and helping to lift that weight.
Right.
So again, there's effort and work involved. And then this person, the spiritual person who's gone to help, their heart is involved. Emotions are tied to that. How this person moves forward is going to affect the one who's spiritual.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's interesting that he words it that way, bear one another's burdens. So here again is our responsibility that when we see someone who's carrying a heavy load, which is the Greek word indicates that burden, is a load that has perhaps become too heavy, and they're struggling to carry that. They need help. And so, like you just aptly described, you don't take the whole burden and try carrying it yourself. I think that might come into considering yourself lest you also be tempted. But you're going to help that individual carry it. It's a burden that is tough for one person to carry. Yep. So now here one or a few more brethren rally around, and now they're supporting this individual. They're strengthening those feeble knees and lifting up the hands that are weak and helping to carry that load. So Paul pointedly notes that fulfills the law of Christ. So that's an awesome thought.
Oh, man, I know.
And it makes me think of when Jesus talked about, on the judgment day, I'll welcome those who gave me a drink and visited me when I was sick. And they're going to go, Lord, when did we ever do that? When did we see you hungry and give you something to eat? Well, it's when you did that for one of the least of these.
You bear the burden of another.
So, right, you have helped, and Jesus is pleased with that.
And burdens, I think, it opens a little more broadly than coming out of verse 1. Burden can be a number of things. Like you said, the cold drink of water, visiting when someone's sick, clothing them when they're naked, someone's lost a loved one, and that's a burden. That is hard, and it's a struggle. And so to bear, to come alongside and to assist through that period of time, to lift that weight is a beautiful thing. And so I know we've said it, but the idea of, for those who are with us, if you're thinking about maybe helping or assisting someone, one of the key parts to this, assuming it's established that you are spiritual amongst the group that you're with, and you are qualified to restore, this idea of considering yourself lest you also be tempted is very important. Paul mentions it again in verse 4 of Galatians 6. Mm-hmm. Let each one examine his own work. 2 Corinthians 13 and verse 5, Paul tells us to examine ourselves, to test ourselves, to see whether we are in the faith. As you mentioned, 1 Corinthians 10:12, take heed lest you also fall, is given to us. In the partaking of the Lord's Supper in 1 Corinthians 11, Paul says, let each man examine himself. So this idea, it shouldn't just come upon us and go, oh boy, I got to check myself out real quick before I go talk to this brother.
Right.
This is an ongoing thing in all these different moments in time which we should be considering ourselves or examining ourselves. And I would even tie in Matthew 7, where Jesus says, you're a hypocrite if you try to remove the speck from your brother's eye. So your brother has a speck, he's overcome with a trespass, and you got a big log sticking out of your face, and you're going to go over there and assist because you think, you're the spiritual one. By the way, if you have a log in your eye and you've properly examined, and someone comes to you and says, we think you're the one to go reach out to him, you need to come clean.
Yes.
That you have your own issue. Do not forge ahead thinking, well, they're depending on me. If your act is not together, if you have not cleaned house in your own home, you are not the one to go and to assist someone who needs spiritual guidance and counsel, because you haven't done it yourself, right?
Yeah, well said. That's a good point. And coming into this, looking at this idea that a spiritual person is prepared, like you were just saying, it's not a spur of the moment thing that, oh, here's a need, I'm going to jump in there and get that. Paul uses the analogy several times in the New Testament of the Christian being a soldier. Mm-hmm. And you don't find in a functioning military the idea of, okay, men, we're going to have a battle tomorrow, so here's your gun, learn how to use it. And practice a few tactics real quick, and then we're going to go into the fight. No, the military spends a lot of time training and retraining, and then going back over what they just trained so that they're prepared. They've already got everything in place when it comes time to deal with a situation, to get into a fight. So here's an individual, this spiritual person they've lived a life that imitates Christ. Over time, they have prepared themselves, whether volitionally or not, that they may not have necessarily focused on, okay, I got to prepare myself just in case some brother needs my help. They have lived a spirit-filled life. Yep. And so God has prepared them.
They've worked that out in their own life.
It's just like with Joseph. Pharaoh didn't choose Joseph because he said, oh, hey, you're a pretty good-looking Hebrew kid. Why don't you take charge of all this stuff? He could see Joseph's wisdom, his organized thinking. It may have been brought to his attention that, hey, this guy was running the whole prison house. He knows how to administer and get things done. It's when he saw that Joseph was ready, that he could do this, that he said, who better can we find than you?
That's right.
You can interpret dreams, and you seem to have this whole thing planned out and you've thought of solutions. Go get it. I'm going to give you the authority.
You're qualified.
You do it.
Nice. Yeah.
So it's the same thing here. God prepares us, and part of being a Christian is to be looking into the law of liberty. You're constantly considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. So that individual's ready to deal with a situation that might come up, because God has done his work in them.
That's
and
right.
They've allowed him to do that.
That's right. And we can't miss again verse 2, you bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ, that to be Christ-like, to be a disciple, to want to be more like him, you want to fulfill the law of Christ. I think every Christian would say, oh, absolutely, show me how. You know, how can I be more like the Savior? Bear one another's burdens.
Yep.
So it's not something that we should run away from or shy away from. It's something, as you pointed out very well, especially as the soldier prepares himself, is to prepare, to be mindful that these things come. And people do terrible things. People in the Lord's church do terrible things, and they fall away, and they come into trouble. And we need to be ready for that, not blindsided, to realize we're in a battle, that Satan will never rest. He will never declare a truce. He wants every one of us until the bitter end, and so we're going to have to fight. And this idea of bearing their burdens is a chore. And like I said, I think emotionally, it'll just wear you out. It could destroy you if you're not spiritually minded.
Yeah.
Because you commit everything you have to someone, you're trying to fulfill the law of Christ, and they end up continuing down the road or just saying, hey, leave me alone. It'll crush a person who's really striving to fight for a person's soul. So again, this being spiritual is absolutely a necessity, come what may.
Right.
We want the reward, but come what may, that person is still spiritual, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's, what you've just pointed out. It shows that as we grow and we're becoming more like Christ and striving to do that, we're also developing the will and the courage to go into battle. Just like, we're all familiar with the military movies where the guy's scared, going into battle and stuff, but he does it anyway. Because he knows there are things on the line here that are greater than he is. And so here's a person who has the will and the courage to confront sin. If you've steeled yourself like that, like you said, that comes with pressure, just like in military combat. That's a tense, violent, pressure-filled situation. But you've strengthened yourself, you've prepared for it. And then it comes back again to what we've discussed. There might be a few other brethren involved. That's going to help deal with that pressure.
Yeah,
You'll be bearing one another's burdens.
Exactly. That's in this
as
passage.
we go through this.
Yeah. And I like verse 3. It seems like he takes a quick turn and just says, if any one of you thinks that he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. So that'll always be a challenge to us, because you got to think about, am I the right person? You need to know the answer to that. Yeah. That has to be settled to begin with. It's like if I were to go, let's just say, to a Major League Baseball team and say I am a relief pitcher and I can throw a 102 mile an hour fastball, and they say, well, you're hired. So I sign the contract, just based on my word, and it's time for me to go out in the ninth inning. Not only have I deceived myself, I have let down my team because I can't throw that hard and it won't be a strike. So I know that about myself, right? That's just a simple, funny way to say it. But don't walk into a hospital and tell them you're a heart surgeon when you work as a mechanic somewhere. You are not a heart surgeon. Don't declare yourself to be one. The first person to know the truth or the lie of that statement is you.
Yep, you are deceiving yourself.
Don't do that.
Yep. Well, it's interesting how that follows what Paul had just said. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks himself to be something when he's nothing, he deceives himself. You get out of yourself when you bear someone else's, you help them bear their burden.
Exactly.
Because then you are, by definition, not self-focused.
Yeah.
You're looking at this other person's need. You're not all wound up in me. And so that's going to keep you from this haughty attitude. This is an arrogant attitude. You think of yourself as something when you're nothing.
Yep.
And it's kind of a warning here. Again, we've been talking about being spiritually prepared. It's not going to be the guy who says, Oh, yeah. I've been a Christian for X number of years, and I've got it all together. I show up at church every time the brethren get together, and so I'm the one to do this job. Well, not necessarily.
Yeah.
If that's your concept, you're not ready to go into this fight.
Yeah.
So you're striving here to save a soul.
That's right.
And so you should know, if you're called on or the situation develops and you're the one who's there to handle it, that you're prepared.
That's right.
And you have that attitude of humility and that spiritual self-awareness again, that I can help this person, and I want to, because that's my brother or sister, and I don't want them to continue in this road and Jesus loses one of his sheep because I didn't try to get him back and protect him from the wolf out there.
That's right. And this idea, the picture of lowliness of mind, to not think too much of yourself, is constantly being given to us in the New Testament. Jesus says, if you want to be first, you've got to be last. Whoever's going to be greatest is going to be the servant of all. Oh, well, congratulations. You want to be the greatest of all? This is how you do it. You learn to serve at the lowest level. Mm-hmm. And then and Paul in Romans chapter 12, he says to associate with the humble. Don't be high-minded. Associate with the humble. Yep. And then Philippians 2, let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus. He tells us there, in lowliness of mind, esteem others higher than yourself. Mm-hmm. So that's part of the spiritual nature and development of who we are supposed to be. So let him who is spiritual, he's got all these things, or she has all these things locked down in their spiritual life, that I'm here to serve. And I think, again, that makes it easy for us in a congregational setting. You and I could quickly say, I know exactly who the person is for this job, depending on who it is that needs help, depending on what the sin is, and what the gender. There's a lot of variables, but you and I would say, you know who would be really good for this? And so we have our candidates, and then, of course, them knowing the value of the soul and their love for the brethren, which we're also commanded to do. They would have a willingness to step into that fight and to do whatever is necessary. And I've seen some mighty Christians, mighty saints, take on that task and just do a wonderful job. And that's a beautiful picture. So it also helps remove this idea, if you think you're something when you're nothing, well, if someone's come to you saying, I think you're the one, then it's not you saying, I'm the guy.
Right.
I run a company, therefore I can fix this person's trespass. No.
Yeah.
Those are not the qualifications.
Right.
So I think you did touch on that very well, but that's an interesting picture that we see. And in verse 4, let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone. So I'm thinking about, let each one examine his own work. We're talking about those who are spiritual, and we're also talking about restoring one who's been overtaken by a trespass. If let's say that me, you, and someone else, we all pitch in different ways that we see fit to help restore such a one, that you and I don't take credit for the restoration process. Obviously, the Word of God is where the power is.
Yes.
But you played a role, and you said some things that were so important and said in such a timely way that they had a positive impact. And then I did something on this part, and that helped and assisted in the process. It reminds me of 1 Corinthians 3:8. I planted, Apollos watered, God provides the increase. And that's the way we should look at it. So I think in verse 4, as we examine our own work and the effort that we've done, whether just in our spiritual lives or in assisting this one, we can rejoice in that alone. I can still be glad that what I said had an impact. I can rejoice that a soul's been restored. Those are good things. But to spread that out and to make sure everyone knows that I'm definitely the guy for the job, and this is my resume. That's not.
Yeah. You're just demonstrating you are not the person for the job.
I just violated everything we just read about. Yeah, that's.
Thank you for allowing us to cross you off the list. Yeah, that person is not ready, because they're not considering themselves lest they be tempted, and they're showing a weakness there that Satan will attack that just as quick as he can. Yeah.
So then verse 5 is the last verse of the passage, and it seems to, I'll let you explain, seem maybe contradicting the first part of it. It says, for each one shall bear his own load. Verse 2 says, bear one another's burdens. Now in verse 5 he says, because each one of you need to bear your own load. So what's the deal?
And I have run into that where people look at that as a contradiction. But a quick word study and just looking at the context would show it. But that load there in verse 5 is in the sense of a responsibility, which ties right back to verse 1. Each one shall bear his own responsibility. And what is that? You who are spiritual, restore such a one when you see them overtaken in a trespass. We bear that responsibility in this context. But all the way, our whole life in Christ is this load. We have responsibilities as Christians.
That's right.
And we're going to bear that responsibility. You can't bear my responsibility for what I need to do.
Not to yourself. No.
I can't say, well, Danny was supposed to take care of that and put all the blame on you, so Lord, deal with him. No, that was my responsibility to take care of that. I was the one who could do it.
It's your load to bear.
Yeah, whatever it is, not even, limited to what we're discussing here, but improve my prayer life, whatever it might be. That comes down on me. It doesn't come down on you or anyone else. I might go to you for help.
Sure.
But that's me fulfilling my responsibility. I need help with this, so I'm going to go see Danny or, whoever else that I think might be able to assist me in this and accomplish that goal. So each one bears his own responsibility, and part of that is helping each other bear those heavy loads.
Yeah, that's right. We bear one another's burdens, and we bear our own load. And you pointed out those are different words, burden and load, and they're separated for a reason. The context helps us with that. So that's all very good. It is a serious, serious topic and a serious issue. I think even if I'm not the one who's selected to attempt to restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, that if it's been made known to me, I have a great responsibility as a Christian to not to spread negative information about a brother who's trying, to give those who have been selected to help, to give them time to fulfill this work. It's not an overnight thing where you say, well, we sent Kurt. I don't know why the guy's not straight. It's been 30 minutes. It takes time.
Yes. Because
these things are difficult. They're overtaken by something. The nature of it itself shows us that it can't just be quickly repaired. It kind of goes back to this idea of resetting a bone. You restore. If your bone's broken and you restore that, it's not healed.
Yep.
Don't go swimming or whatever you think you can do that you could do yesterday, because you got to give it time. We understand that on every level, and for some reason, we're impatient spiritually sometimes. In Philippians 4, Paul tells the Philippian church that he knows that Syntyche and Euodia are at odds with one another. And he says that they need to be of the same mind in the Lord. So whatever the disagreement is, they need to get that straightened out. So now they're overtaken by a trespass. And in the follow-up verse to that, Paul says to his fellow laborer, help them in doing this. So there's a picture of Galatians 6. Paul's chosen someone in that case, but he knows this individual that he's chosen is qualified. And when he says my fellow laborer, he knows that person knows who he's talking about.
Yep.
Because he doesn't mention him by name.
Right.
And not only does that guy know, I bet others know who he's talking about as well.
Mm-hmm.
They labored with him in the Lord and in the gospel.
Yep. Obviously, this is a person Paul has confidence in because he's seen him in action.
Right.
And like you said, he knows they're the person that can address this issue between these two sisters and help them and the entire Philippian church.
So there's Paul living out Galatians 6. He knows they're overtaken by trespass. He's restoring them with his word of exhortation and correction. And then he selects someone to assist in the process because it takes time.
Yes. Yep. Normally, someone doesn't fall into this trespass or allow themselves to be overtaken overnight.
Right.
Satan's been working on that.
That took time too.
And Satan's patient. He just keeps whittling away till he breaks through. And so it's going to take a little time to heal that.
Absolutely.
And help that person.
Absolutely. We hope this has all been helpful for you as you've thought about this with us, considered these things, the great responsibility that we have to one another, that we should love each other fervently in the body of Christ and be willing to go to war for the spiritual good of our brethren whenever we're called upon is a beautiful thing. Don't ever forget or lose track or lose sight of the seriousness of all of this, that we understand a soul to be at stake and in the balance, and we want to pull them from the fire in a way that is gentle and sincere, genuine, having, again, made sure that our life and our heart is right with the Lord before stepping into such a task. We do have trivia questions, and I'd like for you to go first, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Give me that hard one you were talking about so we
Okay.
can get this over with.
Now watch, you'll get this one and blow it on the one that I said. You have no trouble with that one. Okay, so here's question number one. We of course know the Sea of Galilee, and it's talked about all over Scripture. It's all throughout the Scriptures. In fact, the Scripture gives 3 other names for the Sea of Galilee. Can you name one of those names?
Tiberias.
That is correct.
That's the one you thought I wouldn't get?
Yep.
Please tell me the other 3, because I was going to say I think there's 3, but you're saying there's 4.
Well, there's the Sea of Galilee plus 3 other names.
Okay.
So 4. You're right, Sea of Tiberias in John 6:1. It's also the Sea of Chinnereth in Numbers 34:11.
Oh, you went way back.
And it's also the Lake of Gennesaret
Yes.
in Luke 5, verses 1 and 3. So 4 different names for that famous body of water up there in central Israel.
That's really good to know, because you come across these names and you think, well, that must be somewhere else geographically. No, it's the same. The Lake of Gennesaret, the Sea of Galilee, Sea of Tiberias,
And the Sea of Chinnereth, which is an odd one, but that's the old Hebrew name, way back there in Numbers 34. But you nailed it, right? Bam, zing! Didn't even take you a minute to think it over.
Hey,
Way to go!
I do read the Bible occasionally to try to freshen up on things. All right, here's your first question.
Okay.
And I think this is kind of difficult for everybody. I'll just give it to you, and we'll see where it goes. In Luke 13, there is a woman with a spirit of infirmity. For 18 years, she is bent over and could not in any way raise herself up, which would have been horrible for 18 years.
Yeah.
Jesus heals her of her infirmity, and immediately she stands straight up and she glorifies God. So it's a beautiful moment in time. The ruler of the synagogue steps in after this woman has stood up for the first time in 18 years. What does the ruler of the synagogue say?
Come and be healed on the Sabbath, or come and be healed some other time,
Yes.
not on the Sabbath.
That's right. And all I wanted was a general, because I know word for word it's hard. But he says there are 6 days on which men ought to work. Therefore, come and be healed on them and not on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
So he's really laying it down, and then Jesus tears into him.
Yeah. You know, Jesus, when you look at the life of Jesus and his confrontations with the Pharisees, the central area of confrontation was the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Over and over again, he'll do some act of great mercy and kindness on the Sabbath, because I believe he's trying to get them to see something, that the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath.
That's right. He tells them that.
It is not wrong. And like he says, she's a daughter of Abraham, and she's been afflicted, lo, these 18 years. Should we not help her when the help is needed?
When you yourself
do it right now.
will go help a donkey out of a
Yeah,
ditch.
you're right. The hypocrisy of that.
on.
He was trying to chip away at that hard-heartedness, but it says so much. Yeah, I can see you need healing, but come back Tuesday.
Yeah.
You know,
Can you
don't
stay
do it
bent
here
over?
on Saturday. Just the lack of compassion, and that's what I think Jesus, as you pointed out recently in a study, that Jesus was in the synagogue with the man with the withered hand, and everyone was looking at him. The Greek there indicates they were closely observing him. They were watching every move to see what he would do. And he was angry at them because he knew the hardness of their heart. Because rather than thinking, ooh, this man is crippled, he needs help, they're thinking, this Jesus, he's going to do something on the Sabbath.
This is our moment.
And boy, that's going to be that's going to break the law, and we've got him.
Yeah.
What an awful
It's embarrassing.
attitude. Yeah.
So that's Luke 13:14, where the ruler of the synagogue, and just so get your wheels turning, both of my questions are about rulers of the synagogue.
Uh-oh.
So
Okay.
give me your second question.
Well, here's the second one. During Jesus' ministry, we're told he came into the country of Gadarenes, and he ran into a demon-possessed man that dwelt in the tombs and couldn't be bound by chains. He asked the demon his name. What was that name?
Legion.
Yes, correct.
Because there were
because
many.
Possessed by many. And you might correct me in this, but I believe that's the only time we find a demon named. And it's interesting conversation. Jesus commands the demon to come out, and they say, what have we to do with you, Son of God? Are you going to judge us before the time?
It's not our time.
And so Jesus says, what's your name? Interesting question. Only time he ever does that.
Yeah.
And says, our name is Legion, for we are many.
There's a reason for it.
Yep. And so he does accede to their request. He lets them go into the swine.
They go into the swine, and that's where we get our
Yep.
term deviled ham.
I did not set that up, folks.
I'm loaded with these.
I'm claiming innocence in this.
I'm loaded with these, man.
Danny just zinged that one out there. Oh boy.
But those are good little things to help you remember the passage and what happened.
Yeah, and what
where
happened
did Legion
there,
go? Yeah.
and what Jesus was doing in that situation.
So what's the verse for that?
That was Mark chapter 5 at verse 9, and also Luke chapter 8 records that.
Yep.
Verse 30 is when he identifies himself, or they identify themselves as Legion.
Wow. All right, second question. From me to you and to the rest of the world, a ruler of the synagogue fell down at Jesus' feet and begged him to come to his house. His 12-year-old daughter was dying. What was his name?
The synagogue
The ruler
ruler?
of the synagogue.
Oh my. Jairus?
That's right. His name was Jairus.
There we go.
And remember, Jairus is walking to his house with the Lord. The Lord's coming to help. And then the woman with the flow of blood touches him. Jesus stops and says, "Who touched me?" You know, imagine Jairus. And the disciples say, "Lord, why are you saying who touched you? Everyone is pressing on you. Everyone's touching you." And he says, "No, but someone touched me." He felt power come out of him.
He felt power go out. I've thought about that.
Man.
He felt power.
I just feel sorry for Jairus
That's a
because
trip.
he's watching all this unfold.
What about my son?
Or daughter.
Or daughter, yeah.
Yeah, so
We're
Jesus
heading to
says,
my house.
"Who touched me?" And you can just see Jairus going, "Would someone please answer him? You know, we got to go."
Yeah.
But time is not against Jairus. He
No.
has the Creator with
Jesus
him.
has control of everything. So
And he tells Jairus, he tells the woman whose blood flow, "Your faith has made you well."
Mm-hmm.
Then he tells Jairus, "Do not fear, only believe."
yeah,
And imagine again, Jairus, he just told the woman that her faith made her well. He's telling me that I should believe. Faith is tied every step of that journey from where he found Jesus to his house.
and I believe that's the incident. Jairus responds by saying, "Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief." Is that or am I mixing one up?
That's the man. Oh boy, we have to
It probably
look into
is.
it.
You'll have to
It's the
look
man
at
with a demon-possessed son who was throwing himself into.
Right. Yes.
I think that's right.
Yes, that's right.
That was an unfair trivia question at the last second. We hope that everyone has enjoyed this time together with Kurt and I in our conversation of restoring such a one in a spirit of gentleness. We hope and pray that you're equipped and ready and available when this time comes, because it certainly will. The devil's never going to stop. Mm-hmm. We are at war, and we need to be ready. We pray that this has been a blessing to you and that God will be with you and bless you throughout the rest of your week.